Good morning, welcome. Welcome to those in the room and welcome to those joining us via the webcast. I'm Chris Vincent, CEO of the Society. Thank you for being here and thank you for supporting our events. This is the Women's Network Power Breakfast. With respect to housekeeping, we'll be taking questions from the audience live here. Wait for a staff member to come and give you a microphone if you would, and we'll also take questions. We're taking questions online as well from the webcast. So, as you know, we were planning on welcoming Jenny Just, co-founder and managing partner of Peak6 Investments. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we are being joined by Matt Hulsizer, co-founder and managing partner of Peak6 Investments. Matt started Peak6 with Jenny Just in 1997 as a proprietary options trading firm, Peak6 Capital Management. Peak6 is now a multi-billion-dollar firm with a diversified portfolio of businesses, including Peak6 Capital Management, Apex, Fintech Solutions, Evil Geniuses, and Poker Power. Matt and Jenny look for underfunded and undervalued opportunities with potential to transform the future. He and Jenny have created, turned around, or invested in more than 100 companies over the past 2 decades, from options trading and clearing firms to professional sports teams and consumer products. They also share a Tony Award for co-producing the hit musical Memphis. Moderating today's fireside chat, well, let me stop for 1 second before I introduce our moderator. I want to thank Peak6 for being flexible on handling unforeseen events. I'd like to thank you for attending in the audience as well, and I'd really like to thank our staff handling things under the circumstances. They did so, and we would expect no less, but they did so with a great deal of grace and poise. That would be Kim Augustine, Pari Patel, and Don VL Young. Would you? Great job, team. Now, moderating today's fireside chat is Emily Hahn, a member of CFA Society Chicago's CFA Women's Network and an investment consultant at Aon. She's a member of the U.S. Fixed Income Research Team and specializes in underwriting fixed income strategies for OCIO and advisory clients. Would you please join me in welcoming Matt and Emily?
Hey, Matt. How's it going?
How are you?
Thank you for doing this, given that we've had a change of events, a change of moderator, and change of speaker, and just rolling with it. I first wanted to start off talking about options. You know, you come from the options world. How would you say the differences are now versus then? What you and Jenny, originally went into, and what is now what we see?
I would say the changes are fairly dramatic. Both Jenny and I started on the floor of the exchanges when people who looked like me used to stand down there in coats with pencils and pieces of paper and write trades and stick them in a vacuum tube where somebody would then do something called, and young people who are watching, it's called data entry. It doesn't really exist anymore. The automation that existed, we were fortunate enough to be a part of in the late 90s. And so today, we've got call it almost 20 exchanges handling billions and billions of quotes per hour, which is really different than when things used to be quoted in fractions and handwritten.
And how would you say, you guys are kind of leveraging the new technology now in that space versus, again, paper and pencil and guys, haggling on the trading floor?
I mean, I think the original electronification of markets happened in and around 2000 And so it's been about 20 years where we've had the benefits of it. I would say we're actually in version 3.0 now of technology, and I think Peak6 has had to adapt. One of the things that we've seen is that, like derivatives themselves, the market has nuances which are not always clear. So just being, hey, I'm going to buy something for 25 cents and sell it for 30 cents, a minute later it doesn't work anymore. Now you have to understand the interrelation of stocks and indexes and commodities, and so it requires quite a bit more infrastructure.
Yeah, and that being said, what would you say, now you're in this new realm, you're in this realm of fintech, technology, and you're seeing the intersection of finance and technology. So, how do you see are some of kind of the opportunities with that, and how would you say are some of the challenges with that?
I think the opportunities that we see in and around fintech tend to be at the consumer level. And this is something that I think Jenny identified a couple of years ago during COVID, when everybody was sort of at home. Everyone is now really a trader. I think when we started, it used to be a much more selective, fewer people would go into the business. But today, and this is done through Robinhood, it's not Peak6 is doing for sure, but lots of people are in the market. And so that actually opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of who can participate and who can provide liquidity, take risk, hedge, speculate, etc. And so the real opportunity is about the people that have now entered the market, and then what do we do with that? How do we grow, whether it's business, markets, products, given the fact that we've got new participants?
That being said, some people would say you have so many people in the market that may not necessarily have the skill set. You've got the GameStop situation that happened a year ago. What would you say to the critics that say that that having too many people or in the market or people that are not knowledgeable isn't necessarily good for the industry?
I think I worry less about that. I worry about the people who say, we shouldn't have more participants in the market. What you'd find is that and I'll just go back 15 years ago when it was, again, a bunch of old white guys who were all running the hedge funds and big banks, and we're all sitting around and saying, by the way, the real estate market never goes down. And sure enough, we have the financial crisis. So having a diversity of thought tends to benefit markets and tends to benefit society. It won't work out perfectly for everyone, but it will benefit society as a whole.
With that, let's talk about crypto. What are your thoughts on crypto? Full disclosure, my husband invests in crypto, and we have lots of interesting arguments about it. So what do you think? What do you see are the benefits? What do you see the opportunity? I mean, of course, you've heard the idea that maybe crypto will eventually replace money as we know it. So what do you think?
Look, we have we facilitate crypto through a company we own called Apex, where we help customers hold it as an asset class. And so we believe in it as an asset class. I think principally it is incredibly functional as a payment system. Anybody here who's ever had to wire money overseas and go through Western Union and pay exorbitant fees, and I apologize if Western Union's in the audience, but it has been high for a long time, knows that moving Bitcoin around or ETH is quite seamless. So as a payment form, it's pretty incredible. And again, we're a planet. In the US, it may be less functional because we're used to more seamless transactions. But if you're from a country that maybe doesn't have all of our infrastructure, crypto works incredibly well. So we're very supportive of that. There are other functions in terms of blockchain as well that are incredibly useful. Who owned what when? I mean, if you think about, and everybody in this room, I think, is financial. If you think about the baseline of what we do, it started with a ledger. Now, it was an actual ledger that we kept on the ledge in a coffee shop that you own this then. And today it's just something that is more digital. So I think it is really just a modernization of something that has existed for hundreds of years.
What do you think about it in terms of being an investment, not necessarily a form of payment, but, people invest in it and there are incredible swings in it. Thoughts on that?
I mean, there's always going to be swings and stuff when it's early on, and we try not to say and give investment advice. Especially, I'm not going to do that. I think everybody knows the disclosures. I do think that it would be naive for somebody of my generation to look at a 22-year-old and say the digital version of you is not relevant. So things like NFTs that people are using to show themselves in their digital identity and what they are what they have an affinity for, like that seems to be the way the world is going. And so it may not be as relevant to me, but it is probably something that is going to have value going forward.
So, based on your thoughts, I'm guessing that you see value in crypto and blockchain and think of it as kind of the future.
I think it is incredibly relevant going forward. And I'll caveat that by saying I think there's a difference between crypto and blockchain and what people have now called DeFi. And DeFi, I am much more skeptical of.
So what is DeFi?
I think the technical term for it is decentralized finance. Mm-hmm. The issues that tend to occur in DeFi, and coming from the options world, options are about the future, not about what's occurring today. So think of it not as payment, but of something that might happen. And when you don't know things, at some point somebody has to enforce those rules. I could envision a world where Elon Musk, who's in the headlines today for his arguments with Twitter, was offering to buy it with 3 million Bitcoin instead of dollars. Mm-hmm. And the question would be, well, would that be more enforceable or less enforceable as a smart contract? And I'm not seeing a world where it's somehow much more efficient if it had been a smart contract.
No, I think that's interesting that you say that. I mean, I think there's a lot of complexities in kind of figuring out the different spaces and nuances of that. And given your companies are kind of dealing with the nuances and that things are rapidly changing, how do you see yourself in this space? Your kind of yourself as an individual, but yourself as a company, as an infrastructure, and what you're kind of seeing as the future.
I mean, one of the things we try to do is not puff our chests out too much and say we know what's going to happen. So we do a lot of listening. And by listening to a lot of different customers and then executing or helping them and facilitating what they want to do, we then look pretty smart, but that's probably not our prognostication of what's going to happen. So I think we're going to continue to listen. We've done a lot of partnerships with various financial institutions through Apex And so we currently clear and custody for roughly 250 different customers, which are B2B customers, and roughly 25 million actual retail customers. And so we've got well over 100 billion of assets that we see people moving in various directions, and we're able to adjust and adapt in order to make sure that it's, again, faster, better, cheaper.
So you have Peak6 Capital, Apex, Fintech Solutions, you've got Evil Geniuses, you've got Poker Power. I could name, the list could go on. So what's the common link in all of them?
I mean, clearly we have a problem. It starts with an interest. Like, is there a problem to be solved that helps the world? I think one of the benefits of working with Jenny is she has a lot of appreciation for the fact that we're citizens of the world, and the thing, we're not trying to make more money, we're trying to solve problems, and the money will follow. And so there are a lot of ways the world can be improved. And then the question is do we have somebody who wants to do it? Because if it was, Jenny and I have an incredible track record of having a really great idea and then assigning somebody to do it, 100% of the time that fits. We actually need somebody who has the passion themselves that we agree with. And then lastly, you need some sort of insight around what will it take to execute on it. Typically, Peak6 is not known as a great sales organization. We're probably more akin to Google in that we try to do things mostly through engineering and operating skill than by having a better sales team and reach.
So what would you say is kind of the driver of all these businesses? Is it just wanting to push the envelope, or what is it?
I think they tend to be older businesses that need to be transformed, and there is something that is masking or preventing that growth from happening. And so we've done, you've mentioned several. We've got some in education. We've been in the dating business.
The dating business?
Yes.
I heard about some sort of chicken business, and I've heard of the, what was it? You guys also invest in sports teams.
Yes.
So they all seem somewhat random, but how do you get from point A to point B?
So like I said, we typically try to find somebody who has a real passion around, says, I want to do this. I'll pick Evil Geniuses, for example, which is our esports team. And for those in the audience who don't know what esports is, it's similar to, it's video games, and we have teams that play video games, Counter-Strike and League of Legends, Valorant, and it would be akin to, say, a college sport team. We would be akin to, say, the University of Michigan. We're good at many sports. And that industry was growing. There was a lot more people watching it. Okay, so again, young people watching, similar to what we were talking about with crypto. We see this, and the team had been run by Amazon. So Evil Genius had been owned by Amazon. Amazon buys a company called Twitch and is forced to divest the team. So they divested to the players. And this is why there's not a lot of CFAs on the esports team. And so, of course, they inevitably run it into the ground, and they called us, and we looked at it and we said, wow, there's a lot of fans for this, and there's a lot of tuition that has been paid by this team. It needs to pivot itself, not 180 degrees, but maybe more like 30 degrees. And so the woman who runs it for us had worked for us in the investing side and had looked at a lot of other teams and sports and businesses with us and said, I think this is an incredible opportunity. And we took we took that chance. We said, oh, great, by the way, you're now the CEO, so pack your bags, you're moving to Seattle. And that's what happened.
So I saw on the website that Jenny said, we are not defined by one industry or one market. You know what I mean? And given that you two are married, you probably both and also work together, which I think is very unique. I don't know if I could do that with my husband, full disclosure. But, you know, I thought that's an interesting quote because I do think that what you're doing is you're trying to marry technology and finance and the fundamental world of kind of what we know as kind of the CFA, markets, asset managers with the technology world, where the two don't necessarily talk to each other. And I saw a YouTube video where Jenny was kind of talking about that. And so how do you marry those two different worlds so that they do talk to each other and that there is a collaboration? And that's what you are trying to do with Peak6.
Look, I think the benefit of finance, money is language. This has value to me, right? We all have learned that. And for whatever reason, there have been barriers and red tape that has created various bureaucracies that inevitably distance us from the actual thing that is you know, the consumer, the customer, the asset holder. Technology has really shortened that distance and made it much closer. And so, I mean, and Jenny are much like the people that are on this call, like we are financial. I think we could take some of the credit for advancing the ball, but I think most of the ball has been advanced by technology in that they have made the end consumer closer. And so those who have skills in and around finance are able to translate faster and better for folks for what they should be doing with their money. That's, you know, that is the benefit of technology, and that is what we're seeing.
And would you say, how do you kind of, I mean, obviously we're in early stages of fintech. So how do you see the two worlds colliding and kind of built that collaboration?
I think it'd be crazy to think that you're going to have a bank and a broker and an insurance company, and that like you, everybody who's listening, you're a person. You're not hey, I'm an insurance customer here, and I'm a car insurance customer here, and I'm a travel consumer here. Like I'm just a person. And what is happening through fintech in particular is a lot of those barriers and toll taking has come down, and so it's made it much easier to see and move the value you have, your assets, into things that are relevant to you. That's going to continue to happen where I just can't imagine in 20 years that we're going to have lots of different buckets of financial people telling me all the different pieces that I have. I've got a finance account, I've got a fashion account, I've got a travel account. I'm probably just going to have an account, and I'm going to have people advise me to the actual content of the topic, not the finance piece of it.
So in 20 years from now, what do you think, that world's going to look like?
I think people will still have advisors, because most of the world, and this audience not included, most of the world doesn't think about every day like, hey, how do I make an incremental 1% on my money? Most of the world is caring about helping others. How do I cure this disease? How do I build this product? And those of us who care about finance help facilitate that by doing for them something that they don't really necessarily want to do. I think that's going to still be the case. I just think there'll be more education involved in that. So the advisors today will be more educators around things like ESG. How do you teach your kids about finance? Not, hey, is it small cap versus big cap?
So let's talk about talent. How do you think we can build kind of diverse talent? Obviously, the ratio between male and female in the industry, and kind of what are ways that you're thinking about contributing to that discussion and conversation? And I think you're in an interesting position given your partnership with Jenny and what you guys have built.
Look, I appreciate that. I think everybody who's coming to this meeting and on this call who was expecting to, you guys all paid tickets to watch Michael Jordan and he was sick. And I might be Scottie Pippen, but, I understand. I think Jenny's done an amazing job of sort of carrying the torch for women in finance. She's really built our company in an incredible way, and she has now become much more public about that. One of the things we've jointly agreed is sort of a goal for us is we're going to teach 1 million women to play poker. And one of the things that we find is we just got to get more people involved and comfortable in and around finance, and that will help get the numbers higher. They're low, but that will not be the way it will be again 50 years from now.
How do you think kind of poker can contribute to helping build more women going into the industry? I'm just curious about this, even though I already know the answer.
I think we teach 1 million women to play. It will help because they'll be more comfortable around money. Okay, poker is not just a game. It's not a game of card. It's not just a card game. It's a game of skill. It teaches you capital allocation. It teaches you how to take risk. It teaches you, and it's not a great word, but the idea of bluffing, which is not just how to bluff yourself, but also that sometimes people are bluffing. So it teaches you how to negotiate. I was not a poker player. Jenny was not a poker player necessarily, but we have learned recently. Jenny beats me. But that idea of comfort around risk-taking is really going to help make things more accessible. And I can imagine if I had been doing this speech 100 years ago, and I had said to everybody on this call, look, women are going to be driving. They're 12% of the drivers. Everybody would shrug and say, yeah, no, not really. Now, today, we think that that's crazy because women are half the drivers. Or if I had said 80 years ago, hey, women should go to college, and people would say, come on, why? Or 60 years ago, women should work. Again, all of those things today seem incredibly obvious. 50 years from now, people are going to say, hey, women should, I can't believe Matt said women should learn to play poker. Of course, it was obvious. It is obvious. It's a great way to learn, practice, capital allocation, risk-taking skills. And so that's what's going to happen.
How would you say poker has helped you in the way you run your business and kind of both the failures as well as the successes?
So again, I wasn't a poker player, but I have learned through the language of poker, particularly more recently, how to enlighten others what took me too long to realize, which is that the skill of capital allocation is equally distributed. Again, we have 25 million customers at Apex. And having looked through the data, you could look on race, gender, religion, height, number of vowels in your last name. Like, it is equally distributed, the performance. It is not like there is some genetic advantage that somebody has. They don't. Gray matter. That's probably the one thing that matters. And you can't see that. That's the part I think that is sort of enlightening. And poker is really the best tool. It's not the only tool. It's just the best and fastest tool to actually make that and illuminate that fact.
Can you think of a particular situation where poker itself has impacted your business decision making?
I can think of one from 2 weeks ago. We have a bunch of partners who are large financial institutions at Apex, and a very, very large international bank came to us to partner with us. And there's nuances to a negotiation. Again, we both want to be partners. It's not adversarial. It's really a question of like, what's fair? And there was an element of risk involved around crypto in particular, that we wanted to get to something that was fair. And like I said, I'm not a very good poker player. Jenny is the better negotiator, because I was thinking we would start there. Jenny's like, if we start there, we're not going to get to what's fair. We need to start here. And we did. And of course they came back and said, well, we'll never do it. And Jenny's like, they're bluffing. They need this. And look, we want them as a customer and they want to use us. It's like, but they need us actually. Like, and they need to be more fair. She said, okay, well, you're bluffing. Great. We're not going to move. And then they came back and we ended up almost exactly where I had thought we would be at the beginning. It just took Jenny's negotiating skills to get us there.
Interesting. And how would you say you and Jenny kind of work in your partnership in kind of negotiations?
Jenny doesn't negotiate. I'm not a good negotiator.
So I believe on the prep call you called yourselves you are Robin and she's Batman, but there's an interplay. So, how would you say, you probably give your feedback into the negotiation as well as, even though she may be the front person doing the negotiation, right?
I think we've taught each other a lot. I think at the outset, I was probably more typical male and Jenny was probably more typical female. She really leaned towards cooperation and I probably leaned towards competition. And I think we both learned from each other that you need both. And so I think I've learned from her how to be more cooperative, and that that's actually the path of first choice for us. And I think Jenny, who always had a competitive spirit but didn't always necessarily express it, would learn that you have to be prepared to compete. And you always can choose cooperation, but be prepared to compete if you need to. And I think that is the thing we've learned from each other. And so, I don't know, Jenny would say, they who have more passion wins, typically when we make decisions. So she tends to have more passion around things than I do.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I think that describes the interplay between male and female mind frames. You know what I mean? I would say I'm more of the collaborator and my husband is the exact opposite. He is the more, let's go for Tesla and crypto, But how would you say you can get women to be in the mind frame that you can still be collaborative, but you also need that competitive spirit in order to do well in the investment industry?
The great thing about poker is that teaches you that. You learn playing a hand of poker doesn't take long, and it teaches you to win. Because if you don't play or you just muck your cards every time, you lose. My daughter, And if you guys want to watch Jenny or see Jenny, she and my daughter are actually doing a TEDx talk about poker in about a month, specifically on this topic, which is that my daughter, she didn't want to necessarily beat her friends. Like, how do you feel about that? But in poker, like, you actually kind of have to do that or you lose. And so it became the idea of winning isn't necessarily evil. You're not hurting your friends by doing that. It's a game. And you can be social about it and learning that there's an element of luck as well. And so, like, there's a thing of a bad beat. You might have the best cards and still lose. You might have played the hand perfectly and still lose. Like, all of those lessons you learn from poker. And that's, again, why we feel so passionate about it. That's how you want to learn. If you want to learn to compete, play poker.
What would you say is kind of the biggest failure that you've had so far in kind of your business firm success? And how would you say poker has helped you to kind of shift your mind frame with that?
Gosh, we've had so many failures. Investment failure, people failure. Like, I mean, I don't know. We've had so many. What would be most interesting to you?
I would say something that's the intersection between investment failure and people failure, because I think you need both in order to make a successful company.
Okay. I guess one of the big failures. Well, I'll give you a very easy one since you brought up Tesla earlier. In 2008, we believed we saw what was going on. The world was in a crazy spot at the time, if everybody recalls, and we were looking at electric vehicles, and principally because we just thought, gosh, we should probably not be so dependent on petroleum. So we had this correct hypothesis, and we listened to a couple of different pitches, and so finally we got down to two people. One was this kid called Elon Musk, who gets on the phone with me. Jenny wasn't on. She always reminds me of that, and a banker, and he sounded like he was stoned. I was like, this guy comes from PayPal, okay, and I'm not sure he knows what he's doing. And then I got on the phone and we met with a guy named Heinrich Fisker, who had been the chief designer for BMW, which was at the time an incredible, and is still an incredible car company. So you've got this buttoned-up German engineer and this wacky PayPal kid. So when it comes to investing, I said we're going with the buttoned-up German. And Fisker proceeded to literally incinerate the money because the cars would blow up, which that's not a great product proposal. And Tesla today is worth obviously a lot of money. So one of the lessons from that in poker is about reading like people and understanding your biases. I clearly had a bias at the time for the resume and history of the person who we invested in, and not in the person who appeared to be maybe a little bit whacked out.
That is a very interesting story. And obviously you've learned from that. I know we're getting close to time, but I have two questions. One, which it will probably get me in trouble, but I'm going to ask it anyways. You work with your wife. How do you do that? Because I think if I worked with my husband 24/7, we would kill each other. So how do you separate your personal life and your professional life and build this successful empire? And you guys are really a partnership. So how?
Look, I'm incredibly grateful for being married to Jenny. I mean, it's if you think about like what's relevant to people, like we're fortunate. We've been very successful, and I'm not the type of person who great, I've done well. I'm going to go sit on a beach and drink umbrella drinks. I like thinking, and Jenny's a thinker as well. And so, I mean, she's going to watch this, but I mean, for romance to Jenny is me coming up with a good business idea. So it makes it an easier hurdle. I'm very fortunate in that regard. And so that, like, we sit around and we try to think about things that could be better, different. We're not great people who can just go on, like I said, we don't go on a vacation and just be and look at it. Jenny thinks it's a curse. You go on a vacation, you're like, this could be better. We could do this here or this differently. And then, so I'm lucky in that regard because that doesn't get old. My kids are going to leave. We're going to be empty nesters in a year when my daughter goes off to school, my youngest. And I'm lucky I'm with Jenny because it keeps the days interesting.
And one last question before we start taking questions from the audience. You guys invest in quite a few sports teams. Hockey, the League of Ireland, soccer, which I have a full disclosure, I'm a former soccer girl myself. How did you guys get into that?
I'm a person who and Jenny and I are big believers in data and trying to make people better. And so hockey was definitely the outset. Some people go through midlife crises and they get a Ferrari and sometimes even a girlfriend. My midlife crisis was hockey data, and so we hired a bunch of hockey statisticians. We didn't own a team. I just was modeling the game because it looked like language. It looked a lot like markets, and so that data eventually led us to thinking maybe we should buy a team. And then when you start looking at teams, the bankers find you. And then they come to you with things like soccer. And so we ended up in the Premier League. It's not about being famous and like, hey, I want to be the local guy who goes over to cut ribbons at the auto dealership. Like, there are owners who do that. We really like the language of sports because it reminds us of life in many ways. And if you think about the sports we like, hockey, soccer, if you played me on a line with, and there's a lot of Chicago people listening, if you played me on a line with Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane 10 years ago, I would look like I was an amazing hockey player. Because of who I played with and maybe who I played against. And sometimes that can happen. And so one of the things that you find in the markets can be like that too. Anybody who invested in the markets in the last few years, particularly April of 2020 or something like that, you're going to look like you're an amazing investor. So how do you really find, and sports tends to help us find true skill and also how to develop skill. That's how we ended up in sports.
Well, thank you. And with that, I'd like to take questions from the audience. Or do you have a microphone? Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much for the time and insights today. I really appreciate it. The other day I was analyzing something and I just was wondering if you could give me some perspective on it. So I was looking at Warren Buffett's track record, and over the last 15 years, he's actually underperformed the S&P. Although, of course, during his whole career, he's way outperformed it. And I was thinking to myself, or trying to understand why that might be. And if you think about what happened over the last 15 years, like you had mentioned earlier, the proliferation of electronic trading and algorithmic trading has, dramatically changed the markets. But then also, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, there's a much higher percentage of retail investors coming into the market. And so my thesis about this is I believe that algorithmic trading has shifted the average investor from being more value-oriented to more momentum-oriented. And then the additional retail investors in the market has increased demand for stocks. And so I believe that median multiples in the S&P are permanently going to be elevated going forward. And because Buffett is a value investor, he's not the median multiple for a value stock today is very different probably than the median multiple 20 years ago, and that's probably why he's underperforming over the last 15 years. So I'm just curious if you could give us some perspective about that and any thoughts, especially on the technology side.
So, my advice right away is, first of all, don't ever bet against Warren. Okay, Warren is unique. And one of the reasons, and I'll talk about him for a second, and I'll tell you what the market. One, Warren's benchmark is not the S&P. Warren's benchmark is inflation. Warren is super wealthy. And what he doesn't want to do is lose that. He wants to make sure his savings do well. So the S&P has wildly outperformed inflation. Right? Inflation has been almost non-existent for the last 10 years. So that's been a huge boon for the market. Warren, a child of the 70s when we had a lot more inflation, I would have expected him to underperform. The market itself, do we have a sustained higher multiple than the S&P? I'd love for that to be the case. I think more knowledge about risk, right? Risk reward, the idea that you should get a higher multiple for tying your money up for a longer period of time has been proliferated, as you've said. So I would be surprised to see us decline back, even despite inflation. If inflation continues to grow and rates go to 4 or 5%, I still would be very surprised to see stocks and S&P multiples decline to the rate where it was back when people were less knowledgeable about the fact that stocks tend to outperform. Remember, when Warren started investing, very few people were actually investing, and so not everybody knew the benefit of it. I think the fact you're correct in that many people now know the benefit of investing in stocks, and so you'd be harder to get the type of opportunities that he had 50 years ago.
Other questions? I can give you my.
So you said earlier, again, thank you for being here, but that when you think about businesses, it's not about making money, it's about making the world a better place. That seems to me a little bit like boiling the ocean, because boy, there's a lot of work to do. And when you think about the businesses you are in, there seems to be some themes: democratization, gender equity. Is that intentional? Do you have a strategy around that? Or how do you narrow that focus so that so you can actually have that impact, right? Rather than being in everything.
I think the things we tend to be, it's more narrow. So I'll pick insurance and insure tech. Okay, we have an insurance and insure tech business. And I can tell you that right now, if you go to get a home insurance, right, you're going to go to your agent, and it's going to take a long time for them to give you a fair and easy quote on your home. And if there actually was a problem, to file a claim, again, takes longer. We have owned and fixed a business called National Flood Services, where if you've got a house and you need to buy flood insurance, like, it's a Byzantine process. And so that is a very specific problem we're trying to solve. On the gender equity and diversity approach, and this starts with our DNA. I would love to tell you that it is philanthropic. It is not. Okay? People have said that to me. They've said, hey, by the way, you picked Jenny. That was really progressive of you to pick Jenny as a partner at the outset. And we weren't married at the outset. We worked together for years before we got married. I picked Jenny because she was the best operator I had ever come across. And she was as good as anybody I'd ever read about. It was motivated by greed. She happened to be a woman. I think the gender equity thing, our eyes are open to the fact that the talent pool is equally distributed. I don't think this is this is not a jobs program. We don't do that. We hire the best people for the roles. Fortunately, we're listening, and oftentimes the best people don't look like the people who've previously been doing those jobs.
Other questions?
Yeah, I appreciate giving us some insight today. But I was curious about your involvement in on Broadway, Memphis. Like, again, you've got pretty disparate taste in investments, and that's an unusual one too. Could you give us a little background on that?
Sure. So we were on vacation. Like I said, we don't rest. We're on vacation, and a friend had a play opening in San Diego called Memphis. So way off Broadway. It's, hey, come visit. And every one of us has had this where, like, your neighbor's kid is doing something, and so it's a favor. It's a friend. It wasn't as an investment that we went to see this show. And the gentleman's name is David Bryan. He's a friend of ours. He describes himself as a Jew from Edison, New Jersey. Okay, he wrote Memphis, which he wrote all the music for it from. And he's singing this song, or the woman is singing the song in the play about being this strong black woman. And I sat there silently. Jenny is elbowing me and saying, like, you're not saying anything after the show, because they wanted to know what we thought. And I was just floored that this had come out of our friend's mind. It was incredible. I called him an idiot savant, which probably the first thing. I don't have a great filter. And I said, like, it just was unbelievable. Jenny said, she was like, you have to get this on Broadway. You have to. So we wrote the first check to really get the thing to go, which event it went to Seattle first, then it went somewhere else, and then eventually it made its way to Broadway, and then it won the Tony. It was not because we did anything in regards to the content at all. We wrote a check because a friend of ours put on and made something truly brilliant, and we were able to recognize it.
One quick question. I saw the video where Jenny was talking about this, and she said that she didn't go up on stage. Why is that?
It was surreal. So the two of us were sitting there. And you got to remember, it's like Paula Abdul is here, and Michael Douglas, and whatever his wife's name is sitting next to us, and Jay-Z and Beyonce are in front of us, and David's sitting next to us. And, like, we didn't do anything. We wrote a check. So it's their moment. That's sort of, and that's very much of the Peak6 genetics too. Like, we know who we are, and we like to give credit to the people who earned it. Like, David did something truly brilliant, and we wrote a check. So it's sort of hard for us to see us equally going up there and celebrating. I mean, we celebrated with him after, for sure. I definitely had too much to drink that night, but. You know, that at that moment, it was sort of, Jenny and I both felt like we should let them have that spotlight.
Thank you. Other questions in the audience?
Yep, we have a question from the virtual audience. Someone actually wants to know, how can they learn how to play poker with Jenny and Matt?
So pokerpower.com, you should go there, and it's easy to sign up, learn, practice, play. Jenny goes on frequently. She's got regular games. She joins games all the time. I go on occasion. We don't play for real money, by the way. It's fake money. So that pokerpower.com, though, is where you go.
And I want to take this opportunity to give a quick shout out. Jenny and the CFA Women's Network Group, we are planning an event. So we're really excited about it. So if you guys are interested, definitely let us know. Other questions?
We have another one from the virtual audience. Tiffany asks, given your broad investment portfolio, What is one sector that you haven't yet invested in that you would like to explore?
Well, I'll tell you the one that we haven't done well at, but we are exploring currently. I don't know that there's one we haven't done yet. So Lord knows we've lost money in lots of different ways. I'd say the one that we look at and more recently has been opportunistic to us is biotechnology. And the stuff that's going on in and around CRISPR, and again, the same thing that we've seen in fintech is going on currently in biotech, where technology is really making things more accessible. More people will be able to participate in biotech because it's becoming a lot more around data. And genomics is going to, it's going to change the world. We, again, as a species, will all benefit from that, whether it's curing leukemia or cancer or sickle cell. And so if we can invest there and help make that happen, that's something Jenny and I feel strongly about.
There is one question I want to get in that was a question given when one of the members signed up. And I think it's a good one, which is, what advice would you give to college students and or maybe yourself when you were an undergrad?
So I'll give you the advice that Jenny got from her father, which was, he said, manage your own checkbook. Okay, and for CFAs out there, that should be music to your ears, because I think that has really helped Peak6. Jenny has really kept an eye on the pennies, and those pennies tended to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars because she was exceptional at that. And one of the reasons why, we're certainly happy to be a part of this organization and participate in this. So I think that advice from her father resonates with her, and she reminds me of that all the time. And then the advice I would say to the college kids these days is, I think I've said, is play poker. That's the best thing.
I second that. Save your pennies. Any last questions?
Yeah, Matt, earlier you said that when you make investments, you're really reading people, which really resonated with me. Can you help us understand maybe what are the common red flags or green flags you might look for when analyzing people in the sense of making an investment in them and their company?
I would say, so you're going to hear the English major part of me, which is I'm going to hearken my Tolstoy, okay, which is that there's 1,000 things that make things not work, okay, but the happy stories tend to all have the same story, which is that you've got really highly ethical, hardworking, smart people, and those tend to work really well for us. They don't all work, but that's a green flag for us. And the red flags have tended to come in lots and lots of different ways. And it could be accounting, it could be operational skill, it could be HR. We have definitely paid our share of tuition. Many of the things we've invested in have not worked, but they worked for, like I said, 1,000 different reasons.
Okay. We are wrapping up. I really want to thank you, Matt, especially that for both of us, this was definitely unplanned. We did not see this 24 hours ago. And we would like all y'all to complete the survey that you're going to get about this event. It helps us for future events. And if you have any additional questions, please send it our way. And thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.